I've always wanted to do a video where nothing ever went wrong, and that's kind of eluded me. So I thought maybe if I did some of the work before I did the video, maybe I could break that spell. So I did one gate already, and I'm going to record doing the second one. I've kind of got some of the learning curve behind me. This is I got 4 different size pipes here, well 5. This is 1.5 inches. It's fairly thin gauge. I think it's probably from a fence. I think it's fence material. This is 1.25 inches, and I know it's fence material because I know where it came from. And then I actually purchased some 1-inch EMT and some 3/4 EMT, and I had a bunch of 1/2-inch EMT, but I probably won't use it again because it is almost impossible to weld. It's not thick enough. This is all galvanized stuff. My welding is marginal at best, and having this stuff being galvanized, it makes it worse. But the trick I've learned is basically every weld is a series of spot welds. You hit the torch less than a second, you turn it off. It makes a little bead. Like 4 out of 10 times the beads stick, a couple of times they don't stick, a couple of times they go on the floor, and 1 out of 10 times they go in my tennis shoe. So just make a series of beads around it. If you try, or if I try to weld like a normal weld, the material gets hot and goes away instantly because it's very thin. So I've just been doing series of beads. Wouldn't pass a weld test, certainly wouldn't pass the x-ray, but it's strong enough to climb on. I've already done it, and that's all it needs. On the first one, I would take a piece of pipe, cut a notch, bend it a little bit, go tack it so it wouldn't move, come back, cut a notch, tack it so it wouldn't move, and I put several pieces together like that. They were just tacked, and then I undid it, brought them over to the welding table, totally welded them out, and then brought them back. And of course, since I didn't put the first one exactly where it was the first time, half of the other ones didn't fit. So I learned my lesson on that, and I don't have to tack every little cut. I can make 4 or 5 or 6 notches on each piece, bend them, hold it up, get it where I want it to be, and then go weld it out 100%, and then come back and hold it into place. And the last cut is always the one on the steel frame. I always keep them a couple inches long, get the inside to fit. Sometimes I got to regrind a little where it fits round to round, but always the last cut is the against the frame, and I go ahead and weld them every time I get a piece finished, and that way I don't have any problems later on with pieces not fitting. I did learn that I have to wear my leather boots, despite of the fact that I hate that, because after 3 BBs I went in my tennis shoe in 2 days, it's no fun. And besides, when you cut these little notches to bend the pipe, these little scraps on the ground, they're deadly, and they go right through a tennis shoe. So I'm in my leathers, and I got my long no-mech suit on, and it's hot and it's miserable, but at least I'm not getting all burnt up. I did put a plate on my bandsaw as someone suggested, and it made a huge difference. And I also, since I've been like 6 years old, I've been buying 14 tooth per inch bandsaw blades, and I don't even think about it. That's just what I buy. But those don't work well for this thin wall EMT because it's too grabby. So I went and got some 24 teeth per inch, and they did a much better job on this thin material. So I'm gonna gear up and start cutting, and this gate we will try to get some video of the build. I'm gonna start out with putting a little bit of slope on the bottom so the pipe won't come straight up, and then we'll cut a few notches on a couple of different sides to get it to bend and start to make it look more like it's a tree. They don't bend all the way. You just need to cut some more material. It's usually because it's not a good cut. So on this one, you can see I got a little bump right there, but I'll just cut it some more. So that's how the bends are made. This pipe, I think, is maybe thicker wall than the first one I was working with, but it's going to be the same thing. Put the bend, stick it over there, see how it looks, come back, bend some more, go see how it looks, come back, bend some more. I'll get about 3/4 of the way up, and then that'll be the last of this pipe. This is like the trunk. It's bigger than all the rest of the pipe. So the main trunk piece with its 14 cuts and welds is done. There's no right or wrong, just kind of whatever I think looks right. So I got my helper board clamped across the middle, and I use it to hold pieces into place when they're getting ready to be welded. And I got the bottom cleaned up, and I'm going to weld this one. And then that's the last of the 1.5-inch pipe. Now we go down to 1.25 inches. It's a little easier to handle. So much for mistake free. I welded it on the wrong side. Had to cut it loose, swap it around, and weld it again. And in spite of how ugly my welds are, they're pretty dang strong. They're hard to get off. This is the top piece. I've made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pie-shaped cuts out of it. Weld all this up and clean it, and then off the top and cut it, and weld it into place. This is 1.25-inch pipe from a fence top rail. It is a little heavier than the EMT pipe, but it is much lighter than that 1.5-inch pipe I was just working with. You can tell by how quick it cuts and how easy it bends. This is a pleasure to use this stuff. Here, there's no right or wrong. This is just aesthetics. It's what looks good to me, and that's really all that matters. So this is different from most of my typical projects. You can see this thinner stuff cuts quite a bit easier than that original piece, which is pretty heavy. But I've got 5 bends in it. I'm going to go weld these up, and then we'll take a look at it and go from there. So after I cut and welded those 5, I held it up by the gate, and I decided it needed one more bend. I cut it. So I'm going to go weld that up and then hold it in place and mark the ends for the end cuts. Fits. So what I have to do now is cut the notch so I won't have such a big gap to fill with the welding. Alright, so I did a test fit and I'm pretty happy with that. So now I think I'm going to bend it 2 ups. I'm going to bend it up here, I'll bend it up here, and bend it down here. When you're cutting the notches, you want to try to keep this thing level. You don't want to cut 1 notch like this, and then 1 notch like this, and then 1 notch like this, because it won't stay in a plane. It's going to go all over the place. In order to get satisfactory welds on this thin wall tubing, I used
fairly high heat to burn off a little bit of galvanizing and get some penetration. But I wasn't able to run a bead because it would quickly burn a hole in this tube. So I just used a series of overlapping tacks, and by the weld number 50, I was getting pretty good at it. But I did quite a bit more than 50, I promise.
I'll weld it up. I'll give it a quick grind while it's over there on the bench.
So this is how the gate was built. Started out with the 1.5 inches. That was the trunk shape, and then I put in several of the 1.25 inch branches, and then I went to the 1 inch size and put several more, and then the 3/4 size, and I finished up with just a couple of the 1/2 inch pipes, and made this tree shape. It's kind of abstract, but it's kind of cool. Good in the upright position, and then rotated it 90 degrees and got a little bit more weld, and rotated it again 90 degrees. That made the gate upside down and got some more weld, and then I ended up laying it flat down on the welding table and welded and grinded some more until I got probably 95% good welds. When I went to paint it, there was a few little bug holes, but I just filled them with paint, and it's all good.
Ooh, it's a little hot. Cut it. Tuesday morning, the gates are basically complete except for 2 items. One is some sort of latch mechanism I'm going to put right here. And 2, they bowed on me. I guess all the welding on one side. You can see this crack in the middle, and it's touching top and bottom. I'm going to make a slight effort to bend that straight with the big vise. If it doesn't work, I'm okay with it. I did make this latching mechanism. This is for the fixed gate. It'll go up into the wooden header. It's just a 3/4 inch water pipe, and I had this steel pipe in the middle, and my original idea was to drill and tap it so I could take the thing apart and paint it. But this is from that diesel engine. This is the rod that the valve rocker arms ride on, and it's just as hard as the pins. I could not drill it or anything, so I had to weld this stud on, which is fine, but I just can't take it off. So painting will be kind of hit and miss. So I don't know if this is going to work, but I got the top clamped together with a spacer. It's about 1 inch. I got the bottom clamped together with a spacer. It's about 1 inch. I got my big boy vise into position. I'm going to try to lean the frame over into the vise, and I'm going to try to squash the sides together with the vise and try to get some of that warp out of the sides. I've got it moved around into position, and right now I've got 4 inches between the uprights, right where the jaws are. I'm going to try to get 3.5, or try to get it to stay at 3.5 without anything breaking.
So this is my 3rd time. The first 2 times I got it pretty tight, but it just kept springing back. So this time I squashed it until the tubing touched in the middle. So I got it went the wrong way, almost 1 inch. But then when I let go of the vise, it stayed just where it needed to stay. Kind of amazing. I wasn't very optimistic that this would work, but it worked just fine.
So I had a couple of these things. These are for putting like a 2x4 brace on the back inside of a door, just for like security deals. And I bent one straight, pretty straight. And I think I can make it with a pivot where it can go up and down and have a piece of metal on the backside, so they'll go up and down together. It'll be a function of getting the hole off-centered and getting it drilled in the right spot. So I'm going to straighten the other one and proceed. I'm trying to figure out the geometry of this latch. So I just cut the bent end off and I tacked it right there. And I drilled a little hole because I'm not sure if it's in the right spot. But if I pivot it right here, it won't go all the way up. If I pull it back, it will go all the way up, but then when it goes forward, it kind of gets lazy and lays down. Not sure what to do about that. But one thing I know is if I do it like this, it's not sticking out that way far enough, so I won't be able to get a padlock. So what I'm gonna have to do is take this off and put something thinner on the back, and then retry it again. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna cut this loose, put something skinny on the back, and then come play with it some more. Okay, I got something that's gonna work. I'm gonna put pivot right there, and it'll open up like 95% of the way, and it closes at a perfect 90 degree. And I have room to drill a hole and put a padlock on that side. So, go see if I can't fabricate it together and keep it kind of square. This is my welding setup for the latch. It's the same type of tube as is on the gate. I'll put 2 little pieces of cardboard on one side to give it some clearance for paint and stuff. And let's see if I can weld. That's respectable. Working pretty good here. I have no doubt I'll have to redo it somewhat when we get the gate home. But it's time to put this thing in the truck and bring it home. And let's see what's gonna do.